Welcome back to the Fear of Change podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Froemel, LCPC, and I am so excited to go after today's topic, the good girl trap. I'd like to start the episode by just reading to you a statement that I came up with kind of just in one of my conversations with a client. Love that requires you to disappear isn't love, it's performance. So, kind of beginning this episode, there's so much. But before we begin, I want to start by inviting you to do something that we often don't make time for, and that is to pause. Not because we've reached the destination, but because we've walked far enough to notice the landscape changing. And one of the greatest lessons I learned while trekking in the Himalayas is that experienced guides don't spend much time looking at the summit. Instead, they watch the people. They notice the breathing, the fatigue, the energy, and the silence. The pace of perhaps the group, if you're going with a group, and they understand something that is true on the mountain and equally true in our emotional lives. You can't rush acclimatization. The body adapts at the pace that the body adapts, not at the pace that the mind demands. And healing is much the same way. Awareness doesn't instantly transform us. It gives us room to breathe, room to notice, room to understand, and only then room to choose. So perhaps over maybe this past week since my last episode, you maybe started noticing things about yourself that you hadn't fully seen before. Maybe you caught yourself apologizing when no apology was necessary. And maybe you noticed how quickly you volunteered to solve someone else's problem. Maybe you recognized how uncomfortable it felt to even consider putting your own needs ahead of someone else's. Well, if so, nothing has gone wrong. In fact, that would mean that something has really begun. You're becoming aware. And awareness is always the first step to coming home. So, the girl everyone loved, right? This is like everyone's thing. I'd like to tell you about someone called Emily. Emily wasn't particularly rebellious. She wasn't loud. She wasn't difficult. Teachers loved having her in class. She followed directions. She finished her homework. She helped classmates who were struggling. And if another person forgot a pencil, she'd offer hers. If the teacher needed a volunteer, she'd go hand up first. And at home, though, she noticed things. If her mother looked tired, Emily offered to help with dinner. If her younger brother became upset, Emily distracted him. If guests came over, she'd help clean without being asked. People described Emily using words like sweet and kind and mature and thoughtful. Her parents were proud of her. Her teachers appreciated her. Her grandparents adored her. And every compliment gently taught her something. Being helpful feels good. Being easily able to make people smile feels good. And being needed made her valuable. Yep. No one sat her down and said, your worth depends on taking care of everyone else. No one intended to teach her that lesson. She learned it the way children learn almost everything, by paying attention. Children are extraordinary observers. Long before they understand psychology, they understand connection. They notice what earns approval, what creates tension, what disappoints people, what makes adults relax, and because every child longs to belong, they adapt. Emily wasn't pretending. She truly loved helping. That was genuine. But over time, helping quietly became who she believed she had to be. When being good stopped feeling good for her, we go 40 years into the future. She's now 49 years old. She's built a successful career, raised two remarkable children, been married for 25 years. She's the person everyone depends on. Her coworkers trust her. Her family counts on her. She remembers birthdays. She calls her friends first. She plans vacations. She coordinates holidays. She checks on aging parents. She sends sympathy cards. She organizes meals when people get sick. She knows everyone's favorite restaurant, everyone's allergies, everyone's schedules, everyone's struggles. And one afternoon, she sat across from me and quietly said, "I don't know why I'm here." And I smiled and I laughed and I said, "I've heard this a lot." And she said, "I'm just tired. I'm not sleepy, I'm not physically exhausted, like soul tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix." After a few moments, she looked at me and whispered, "I don't even know what I'd like anymore." I asked, "When was the last time you did something simply because it brought you joy?" And she looked genuinely puzzled. Not because she didn't understand the question, but because she couldn't remember the answer. That moment stayed with me. I think it stayed with her too, because Emily hadn't lost herself through one traumatic event. She hadn't slowly become so good at caring for everyone else's life that she really stopped participating in her own life. So we talked about it. And she said, "I don't know what this is." And I said, "Well, over the years, I've begun thinking about something I call the invisible contract. It's not written anywhere. No one signs it, yet many women and men carry it every day. It sounds something like this: if I'm helpful, I will be loved. If I'm dependable, I will belong. If I don't disappoint anyone, everything will stay okay. If I carry enough, maybe no one will notice how tired I am." Perhaps you've never consciously believed those words. Most women haven't. But beliefs don't have to be spoken to shape our lives. And that's why I call it the invisible contract, because sometimes they're simply lived day after day after day, year after year, until they begin feeling like truth. And here's what I want you to know. This isn't about blaming kindness. This isn't, anything bad. This is kindness is beautiful. Generosity changes lives. Compassion heals. The problem isn't kindness. The problem is when kindness only flows in one direction, toward everyone else and never towards ourselves. Healthy love includes self-respect. Healthy compassion includes self-compassion. Healthy generosity includes receiving. When those qualities become one-sided, eventually love begins feeling like performance, and performance is exhausting. Unless you're a performer, I don't know. I think about that often. Like, that's what you do for a living. So then how do you unwind? I don't know. Haven't had a performer as a client in a while. But here's where I came up with. I was like, the backpack that we never chose to carry, right? As I thought about this episode, I found myself remembering another lesson from the mountains. Before every trek, they go through and look at our backpacks and they weigh our backpacks. Not because the weight is bad, but because unnecessary weight eventually becomes suffrage. And imagine beginning a long climb carrying a backpack that someone quietly adds to every year. One stone labeled "Don't disappoint anyone." Another stone labeled "Be perfect." Another saying "Everyone keeps happy as long as you keep them happy." Another "Don't ask for too much." Another "You should be able to handle this." Another "The backpack doesn't seem heavy. It's just you. You're not young anymore." But the thing is you are a strong person, right? You're capable. You keep walking, year after year after year. But the trail becomes steeper. Your knees start to ache. Your breathing changes. Your shoulders become sore. And eventually you begin wondering, why is this so hard? Perhaps it's not because you're weak. Perhaps you've simply been carrying things that were never yours to carry. So, before we move forward, I want to leave you here thinking about something. And I don't want you to answer it quickly. Just keep it with you. Let it walk beside you. If no one expected you to earn love, how would you live differently? How would you speak differently? How would you rest differently? How would you love differently? And how would you lead differently? But even more so, how would you care for yourself? The answer to that question may already be quietly awaiting inside of you, and together we can listen to it. So one of the questions I hear most often is surprisingly simple. Jennifer, why is this so hard? And it's not, why is this hard to love my family? Why is it hard to work? Why is it hard to care about other people? The question's much quieter. Why is it so hard to care for myself without feeling guilty? If you've ever wondered that, I'd like to begin with something that I hope brings you relief. You were not born believing your needs mattered less than everyone else's. No baby apologizes for crying. No toddler feels guilty for asking to be held. No child naturally believes she has to earn love through achievement or usefulness. Those beliefs are learned. Not because someone necessarily taught them intentionally, but because human beings learn through relationships. We learn through observation. We learn through emotional experiences. And once our brains discover a pattern that appears to keep us connected to the people we love, we keep repeating it typically, even decades later. So, your nervous system really does remember what your mind has forgotten. So imagine for a moment you're 6 years old and you noticed that your mother seemed overwhelmed. Your father had a difficult day and your younger brother is crying. Without anyone asking, you quietly begin helping. Maybe you start making your own lunch sandwich. Maybe you comfort your brother. Maybe you just are already seated at the table with your hands washed. You're quieter, you're less demanding. The adults smile at you and life seems to settle down. Your young nervous system quietly learned something. When I make life easier for everyone else, people relax. Again, no one intended to teach that lesson, but your body remembers it. Fast forward 40 years, someone asks you to take one more committee piece on. One more committee. Watch what happens. Your thinking brain may say, I'm already overwhelmed. But your nervous system might say, if you say no, someone may be disappointed. Your body responds before your words do. Your shoulders get tense. Your breathing changes. It's more shallow and short. Your stomach gets tight and you hear yourself saying to yourself, sure, I'd be happy to help. And afterwards you go, why did I do that again? Because your nervous system wasn't making a decision based only on today's request. It was responding to decades of learned experience. The realization is incredibly important because it replaces blame with understanding. So one of the things that I love about research is that it reminds us, again, we're not alone. Researchers who study relationships, caregiving, and emotional labor have consistently found that women often carry a disproportionate amount of the invisible work within a family and a workplace. It's not simply doing more tasks, it's remembering them, planning them, anticipating them, tracking everyone else's needs while quietly setting aside their own. Psychologists have also studied something called self-silencing, the tendency to suppress one's own thoughts, needs, or emotions in order to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. So you see, guys, you're self-silencing. While everyone's experiences are unique, studies have linked chronic self-silencing with higher levels of emotional distress, depressive symptoms, relationship dissatisfaction, and increased stress. Why? Because human beings weren't designed to continually ignore themselves. We are wired for connection, but healthy connection includes ourselves. Research on chronic stress also tells us something important. When the stress response remains activated for long periods of time, it doesn't simply affect our emotions. It can influence sleep, memory, attention, immune function, blood sugar regulation, cardiovascular health, mood, energy, And the body keeps adapting until one day it simply says, you got to pay attention. So, this is where the body keeps asking the same question. Have you ever noticed that your body sometimes seems to interrupt your life? Perhaps you've developed migraines during a particularly stressful season. Perhaps your stomach became super sensitive. Perhaps you struggled to sleep. Perhaps your shoulders remained tight no matter how many massages you scheduled. And again, this doesn't mean every physical symptom is caused by stress. It's far from it. But medical evaluation is always important when symptoms arise. But our emotional lives and our physical health constantly influence one another. Sometimes I imagine the body as the quiet member of the family. It doesn't interrupt often, it simply whispers, slow down, something isn't working. Please listen. When we continue ignoring the whispers, the body often speaks louder. Not because it wants to punish us, but because it wants to protect us. Which is why I so often remind clients, your body is not your enemy. It may simply be telling the truth your heart has been too busy to say. So, there's a difference between healthy giving and self-abandonment. One of the things I never want to communicate is that generosity is unhealthy, because it isn't. Some of the most beautiful people I've ever known are deeply generous. The question isn't whether we give. The question is whether we disappear while giving. Imagine a well. Every day people come to draw water. You gladly share. It's why the well exists. But what happens if no rain ever replenishes it? Eventually, the well runs dry. Not because giving was wrong, because replenishment never occurred. Healthy love flows outward, and healthy love also flows inward. The same woman who comforts a grieving friend deserves comfort when she grieves. The same woman who remembers everyone's birthdays deserves someone who remembers hers. The same woman who asks, "How are you doing?" deserves to hear someone sincerely ask, "How are you, really?" Receiving isn't selfish, and receiving completes the cycle. So again, yin and yang. Earlier, we explored the idea of yin and yang energy as complementary energies that happen in our body. And I want to return here to recognize that healthy yin is deeply nurturing. It listens, it comforts, it receives, it reflects. Healthy yang protects our acts. It helps create healthy boundaries. It moves us toward purpose. So the good girl often becomes trapped in what I call shadow yin. She nurtures everyone, receives from barely anyone, and she comforts everyone and rarely asks for comfort herself. She carries burdens that were never hers. She believes exhaustion is evidence of love. But exhaustion has never been proof of love. It's often proof that balance has been lost, is really what we see. Healing doesn't ask us to become less compassionate. Healing invites compassion to finally include ourselves. So for many women, this chapter or this, part of life becomes especially meaningful when you're in midlife. Not because the good girl suddenly disappears, because the strategies that once helped us begin reaching that limit of being a good girl. Hormonal changes can influence your sleep, your mood, your resilience. Children can become more independent. Parents often need greater care at this time. Careers become more demanding or begin winding down. Life asks different questions now. And so that woman in midlife who once had enough energy to carry for everything suddenly realizes she can't keep doing it. Many women interpret this as a failure, but I don't. I think it's wisdom. It's the body saying there's another way to be. And perhaps there is, but not by becoming someone entirely different, but by remembering that the little girl who learned to love through usefulness has grown into a woman who no longer needs to prove she's worthy. So, as you've been going through this episode, I wonder if you recognized that, Good girl wasn't a weakness. She was adapting. She helped you belong. She helped you survive. She helped you become the compassionate woman you are today, and that she deserves gratitude. She doesn't have to remain in charge for forever because there is another woman quietly waiting, a woman who still deeply loves and who gives generously, who still shows up wholeheartedly, but no longer believes she must disappear in order to be loved. In this next chapter of yourself, you can begin to learn how to be grateful that that good girl has done all that she has. Not that you have to become someone different, but just recognize, all right, she helped me through one phase of life. So now I need to loosen the grip, right? And I need to stop carrying all of that. So we need to thank the good girl. And it might sound unusual, but again, a lot of times we come to this place where we're encouraged to eliminate parts of ourselves that no longer serve us. I don't believe that's really how healing works 100%. The good girl deserves something far different. She deserves gratitude. After all, she helped you survive. She helped you belong. She helped you become dependable. She protected you the very way she knew how. And the goal isn't really to get rid of her. The goal is simply to help her realize she's no longer has to carry the entire burden by herself. And sometimes I like to invite clients to close their eyes and imagine meeting a younger version of themselves. Maybe it was you at age 8, maybe 12, and you're sitting quietly in your bedroom, wondering how to make life easier for everyone else. Now imagine your adult self kneeling beside her. What would you say? Perhaps something like, thanks. Thank you for helping us survive. Thank you for loving so deeply. You don't have to carry all of this anymore. I've got us now. Sometimes healing begins with comforting the child who spent years comforting everyone else. So, one of the greatest gifts I think you can give yourself is not a better answer, but it's a pause before answering. Imagine someone says something like, can I help? Can you help with one more project? And instead of responding automatically, again, take a slow, deep breath and notice your body. Does your chest tighten? Does your shoulders lift? Does your stomach sink? And then quietly ask yourself 3 questions. Do I truly have the capacity? Am I saying yes because I want to? Am I afraid of disappointing someone if I say no? And there really isn't a right answer. There's simply awareness. Sometimes you still say yes. Sometimes you still say no. Sometimes you'll say, I need to think about it. That sentence alone has transformed the lives of many women I've worked with because for the first time, they've included themselves in the conversation. A woman I'll call Michelle once smiled as she walked into my office and said, I did something unbelievable this week. I laughed. What happened? She said, my neighbor asked if I could watch her children on Saturday, and I nodded. And I told her I'd let her know tomorrow. And she laughed before continuing. Jennifer, I've never done that before. We both smiled. It wasn't about babysitting, right? It wasn't about saying no. It was about discovering that she was allowed to check with herself before automatically saying yes. That tiny little pause changed far more than one Saturday afternoon. It began changing her relationship with herself. Healing often begins exactly that quietly. So, this next doorway might be the hardest to walk through. But not because giving is difficult, but because receiving can feel really weird and unfamiliar. And many women I've worked with are incredibly uncomfortable when someone offers to help them. Someone offers dinner. Oh, no, I'm fine. Someone offers childcare. Oh, I couldn't ask you to do that. Or someone offers to listen. I don't want to burden you. Notice the language, burden, just by listening to me. But imagine if one of your friends needed help. Would you want to ask her? Most women immediately are like, no, of course I'd help. right? Then ask, what makes you different? Because the room usually becomes really quiet, and healthy relationships require both giving and receiving. So when we refuse to receive, it's like, why? We're intentionally or unintentionally denying someone else the opportunity to experience the joy of giving. Receiving isn't weakness, it's trust. So I'd like to gently challenge one word: good. What does it actually mean? Many women define good as always available, always agreeable, always dependable, always sacrificing. But what if goodness looked different? What if a good woman was also honest, well rested, emotionally present, and able to say no when necessary, able to ask for help, able to model healthy boundaries for her kids? Imagine the lesson your daughter would learn when she watches you say, "No, I really can't today." Imagine the lesson your son learns when he sees a woman honoring her own needs. Boundaries don't simply protect us, they teach the next generation what healthy love looks like. So I want you to choose one small act of self respect every day, right? I didn't say self care, I said self respect. Self care has become such a broad phrase that it sometimes feels overwhelming. So instead, I say one small act of self respect. Drink water before another cup of coffee. Take your lunch break. Leave work on time. Go for a walk. Say, "I can't tonight." Ask for help. Keep your doctor's appointment. Read 10 pages of the novel sitting on your nightstand. One small act is not going to kill you. Do it every day. Over time, those moments quietly teach your nervous system something it may never fully have believed. I matter too. I matter too. Yeah. So, again, Jennifer's reflection. One of the greatest privileges of my work has been watching women slowly stop apologizing for existing. Not overnight, one conversation at a time, one boundary at a time, one courageous pause at a time. Sometimes people ask, "Jennifer, what's the biggest difference you see between the woman who first walks into your office and the woman who eventually leaves?" And the answer always surprises them. She doesn't become less loving, she becomes less afraid. Less afraid that saying no will make her unlovable. Less afraid that disappointing someone means that she's disappointing everyone. Less afraid that resting means she's lazy. Less afraid that asking for help means she's weak. She still loves deeply. She simply stops abandoning herself in the process. To me, that's not selfishness. That's maturity. Because love that actually includes you is healthier than love that requires you to disappear. So, this week's practice, I'd like to invite you into a simple practice this week. Every evening, before going to bed, write down one moment you honored yourself. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Perhaps you paused before answering. Perhaps you accepted help. Perhaps you rested. Perhaps you told the truth. Perhaps you simply noticed your own exhaustion instead of ignoring it. And at the end of the week, read your list. Not to judge yourself, but to celebrate every step, because mountains aren't climbed in giant leaps. They're climbed one intentional step at a time. And healing, it works the same way. So as we leave this episode, I'd like you to imagine placing a heavy backpack on the ground. Not forever. Just long enough to look inside. Notice the stones you've been carrying. Be perfect. Don't disappoint. Keep everyone happy. And then gently ask yourself, which of these stones was never mine to carry? Perhaps you don't need to throw them all away at once. Perhaps today you simply leave one beside the trail and then you keep walking. A little lighter, a little freer, and more fully yourself, because every step you take with greater self-compassion is another step toward coming home. Because ultimately, in what I've experienced, there are moments in my work that I will never forget. And again, not because they were dramatic, but because they were beautifully ordinary. A woman taking a deep breath before answering a question. Someone saying, I don't think I can do that. And then quietly realizing she already has. A client smiling through tears as she says, I ordered what I wanted at the restaurant instead of letting everyone else decide. Someone else says, I asked my husband to pick up dinner because I was exhausted. And another woman says, I didn't apologize today for something that wasn't my responsibility. And these might seem really insignificant, but to me, they're extraordinary because those moments aren't really about restaurants or dinner or apologies. They're about something much deeper. They're about a woman slowly believing that she belongs in her own life. Over the years, people have occasionally asked me what healing looks like. They expect me to describe some dramatic breakthrough, life-changing conversation, powerful moments of insight. And those happen. But honestly, healing usually looks much quieter. It looks like a woman pausing before saying yes. It looks like asking for help without apologizing. It looks like going to bed and without finishing every chore. It looks like taking a walk because her body asked for movement instead of, doing whatever she was told she had to do that day. It looks like calling a friend because she needs connection instead of convincing herself she should be able to handle everything alone. Healing rarely announces itself. It quietly becomes a different way of being. Sometimes I think we've misunderstood courage. We often imagine courage as something dramatic, standing on a stage, making a bold statement, walking away from everything. But perhaps courage is much smaller than that. Perhaps courage is telling the truth. And the truth is, I'm tired. I can't do that right now. I'd love to, but not at this moment. Those simple sentences can feel terrifying to someone who feels that you've spent decades believing love depended upon endlessly being available. And if that's you, know that you're not failing because these changes feel uncomfortable. You're growing. And growth almost always feels unfamiliar before it feels freeing. So, a moment of stillness. I'd like to invite you into a brief mindfulness practice. Imagine that we're sitting together at the edge of a mountains trail. We've been walking for a while. The view is spectacular. The air is quiet. There is nowhere else you need to be right now, just right here on this trail. I want you to take one slow breath in and then exhale and then do another. And allow your shoulders to soften. And feel your feet resting on the ground beneath you. Imagine taking off the backpack you've been carrying. You don't have to unpack everything today. Simply place it beside you. Notice its weight, and without judgment, imagine looking inside. I want you now to say, I release. And say it again. I release. And then I want you to say, I receive. And then say again, I release. Imagine placing one unnecessary stone beside the trail, not because you've solved everything, but because you've decided you no longer have to carry everything. When you're ready, I want you to imagine yourself continuing to walk with that backpack back on, maybe a little lighter than before. So something for you to consider as you move forward in this week. I want to invite you to carry these questions rather than rush them. When did I first begin believing that being helpful made me lovable? Which expectations in my life genuinely reflect my values? Which expectations belong to someone else's story? Where do I feel guilt when I care for myself? Is that guilt protecting a relationship or protecting an old belief? What would healthy love look like if it included me too? And if I believed my worth could never be earned because it already existed, what would change tomorrow morning when I woke up? So this week, I'd like for you to think about healthy love invites you to arrive more fully as yourself. As we continue this journey of coming home to yourself, we're leaving behind the belief that our value depends upon our usefulness. Another question that follows quickly behind it is, if I stop trying so hard to be agreeable, if I stop measuring my worth by everyone else's approval, why does speaking up feel so hard or frightening? Why do intelligent women, why do capable women, why do compassionate women still hesitate to use their voices? The answer isn't found in a lack of confidence. It's often found in the memories held by the nervous system. So in this next episode, we'll explore why so many smart women stay quiet, not because they lack wisdom, but because somewhere along the way their bodies learn the visibility could come with consequences, the negative ones. We'll simply discover in that what your voice is missing, what it isn't missing. We're going to begin to start the process of finding your voice's way home. So I'd like to leave you with something to carry throughout this next week, outside of those questions. Recognize that there will be days when old patterns come back. And there will be days when saying yes feels easier than disappointing someone. And there are days when guilt grows louder than your own needs. They simply mean you're human. Remember the mountains. No meaningful trail is one continuous climb. There are gentle stretches, steep ascents, places to rest, moments when the clouds hide the view, and then almost unexpectedly, the path opens up again. Healing follows that same exact rhythm. So be patient with yourself. Walk at the pace of your nervous system. Rest when you need to. Trust that every intentional step matters, because it does. Awareness creates choice, and choice creates change. And every small choice is one more step toward coming home to yourself. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you in the next episode.